Hi, everybody. Welcome to Broomfield Conversations. My name's Peggy Reed, and I'm with the Broomfield Democrats. And tonight, we're going to talk to Jim Candelarie. He's famous in Broomfield for many things, most recently for being the clerk and recorder for Broomfield County. But before we start talking to Jim, we've got a couple things we need to talk about first. So I wanted to announce a couple meetings. One is a Broomfield Conversation that's going to be next week on National Popular Vote with Sylvia Bernstein. This is a ballot initiative that is back on the ballot for Colorado, and we'll learn the details about why we're voting on this again in 2020. And then on August 13th, our monthly meeting in August will be with Morgan Carroll. She's the Colorado Democratic Party chair. And she's going to talk to us about get out the vote in Colorado, as well as some specific hotly contested races that will be really interesting around the state. So to use the chat window, that's what we're going to use tonight to ask questions of our guest, Jim. And so the way that it works in Zoom is you move your mouse down to the bottom of the screen to the control panel. And then when you see the chat menu item, you click on it to open and then type in your questions. And we'll do our very best tonight to get to all the questions in the chat window. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jim. Oh, I lied. What I'm going to do is ask for money before I introduce Jim. So let me talk about why we need money. It's an election year, and it's a really important year. And because of COVID, our get out the vote process really needs to change. And our goal is to get out the vote in Broomfield County. And in order to do that, we've got to provide education and buy tools to do that. So here's my plea. Please give us money and please donate. And there's two places here. There's a QR code, and also in the chat window, there's a URL where you can donate. And what you're buying is you're buying education, and you're helping us elect officials that are responsive to our needs and have our values. So vote, donate, and volunteer. Okay, now we're going to get to Jim. So our speaker, Jim Candelarie, has been was the Broomfield County Clerk and Recorder for 8 years, and he was a Broomfield election administrator for 9 years. He has a lot of expertise and knowledge in elections. Prior to his 17 years in Broomfield, he conducted elections in other counties as the deputy clerk and recorder, and also worked at the Colorado Secretary of State as an election administrator. Jim did a lot of cool stuff while he was clerk and recorder for Broomfield. And there's a list of 3 of these things that I think we should say thank you for. The motor vehicle is we have a kiosk for license plate renewal. We also have online documents for free. And he really has made our election process to be easier and to use mail ballots. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Jim.
Oh, thank you, Peggy. You know, it's exciting to do this for me. As Peggy was saying, you know, I'm retired now, and part of the good part is that people still want to hear from me, and that's nice. That's flattering, right? So thank you for giving me this opportunity. And so let me just again say that I'm excited to do this, and I hope you have questions. And so let's get started. You know, I always like to start with the good stuff, right? And the good stuff is, well, one, I am retired. So I'm thoroughly enjoying my retirement. I know I've had a lot of people ask me, how's it going with retirement? And it's been great. It's been great. But it is so good to see everybody. I see Tina. It's nice to see you again, Tina. And, I've made a lot of friendships in Broomfield, and thank you again. But the other thing that's good is now that I'm retired, I don't represent Broomfield at all. I have nothing to do with Broomfield, and I enjoyed my time with Broomfield, but the reason it's good is because I'm not representing them, so I can just tell you what I think, right? And so you're going to get it straight from me tonight, whatever you want to ask. And just going to tell you what I think. The bad is because I am retired, I don't have access to all the data. And elections is really geared and driven by data. At least I think it should be. And so there may be some questions that I'm unable to ask, or I can tell you, like most retired people, well, the way I remember it kind of stories. So that's the bad thing. And then the ugly part of this is if I can get you to go back to that other screen that you had up of my presentation, or your introduction of me. I'll talk about that for a second.
Sorry, Jim.
Oh, that's okay.
There you go.
Okay, one more, one more. Okay, the bad part here is, if you notice the photo, I have no official photos of me. So this was one that was probably not my best angle, but hopefully you'll forgive that photo of me, and we'll go forward. But through my 63-year-old eyes, I was still looking pretty good back then. So, but what's really, now you can go back to the other screen. Yeah, right there's fine. You know, the other part that is truly really ugly, besides that not flattering picture of me, was disheartening and really infuriated me as an election official, was just the struggle that other counties and jurisdictions had over this last primary election. You know, conducting elections in a pandemic, and we saw it across the nation. It was, primaries were struggling to conduct them. As far as absentee voting, there were tremendous long lines. There was voter suppression. But in fairness, I think, you know, the pandemic hit really in March. There wasn't a lot of time for election officials to prepare, to educate the voters on what to do and what the process would be like, and educate their boards. But now we've had more time. And so I think November hopefully will be substantially better, but there's going to still be those problems. I believe, because across the nation, there's people, jurisdictions who haven't done a lot of absentee voting, who haven't done mail ballots at all. They still do precinct voting. It's going to be a tremendous challenge. And so I think it's easy to see, if these problems aren't resolved, the chaos that potentially could happen in November, right down to the presidential race itself. And that worries me. That's the ugly part of it. If I can have the next screen. Okay, so what I've been thinking about it, and I think there are some simple things that we can do on a national level and county level here in Colorado. And then I want to talk a little bit about, specific steps that Broomfield can do, and steps that I think the Broomfield Democratic Party can do. And we'll start with the national steps. If I can have the next slide, please. Okay, as far as national steps, again, I think these are really simple steps that can just make a dramatic difference in reducing the possibility of the disaster that I talked about potentially could happen. The ballot box and mailbox this year. I think first, Secretary of States across the nation need to set really clear rules. And they need to do this as early as possible. I think, again, because the impact of coronavirus really hadn't hit America till March, we didn't have the information. But I think we have a much better view of what's going to be needed now. And if the rules are not set clearly, early, that's the real key is early. So it allows local election officials to educate the voters. That's a key part. Their staff and how they're going to implement the rules. Because if people don't know, there's confusion, there's frustration, there's feelings of distrust. All those things are negatives for democracy, and that's what we really need to avoid. Again, the key, I believe, is implementing those rules early, because there's going to be obviously legal challenges to all those rules. And so the earlier they can set the rules, Secretary of States across the nation, the more successful the local election officials will be. The other part that's really clear is increased workers. The outreach effort that you'll see when people change rules, right? I used to go to a precinct. Now they combine them, or what are the absentee rules in this particular state? Because they vary so much from state to state. Those need to be clear to people, and that's going to come at a tremendous expense, not only dollars, but time. And states, local officials are going to have to really increase their work staff in order to address those educational portions of implementing new rules. And there has to be new rules. And I'll talk about what some of those will be, but just when we talk about rules dealing with social distancing, absentee ballots, they go on and on. And so it's really important that those rules get set very clearly, very early, so that they can go through the legal process of enacting those rules. Next bullet point that I have is dispel and speak out against misinformation. That is going to be a tremendous challenge that every election administrator, hopefully every elected official will take upon themselves to do. Because right now, we're getting a lot of misinformation from Washington, from the president, and now the new attorney general, right? I mean, mail ballots full of fraud. That's not true. And they got to find ways to instill confidence in voters that it's not fraudulent. Their vote is going to count. If people believe it doesn't count, they're not going to show up. They're not going to participate. And nothing could be worse than that. So to me, that's a key element, that it needs to be organized in such a way to really ensure confidence in people that the system works. And I see that as the number one thing that on a national level that needs to happen is speak out and educate the public. Educate the public on, again, the new rules, the process is fair, equitable, and instill that confidence. Again, we need to really speak out against, baseless misinformation. And, I'll talk a little bit more about cyber information, that type of thing later on. But those are the big things at the national level. If somebody has questions, they can throw that out to me too as I'm rambling, or you can wait. What's the preferred way to do it?
What I'm hoping, Jim, is we'll get through some of your slides, and I think we've got the chat window. So
Okay.
At any time, if you want to stop and take questions, we can absolutely do that.
Okay. Let's keep going and you can interrupt me at any time. We'll do it that way. Okay.
Sure.
Keep talking. Yeah. For those who are new to me, I can talk for a long time. So, hang in there with me. Okay. Next slide. Okay, these are some, again, simple steps for Colorado counties. I think the first thing I want to say is Colorado is really set up for success. Why is that? Well, we've been doing mail ballot elections for several years now. We've gone through trial and error. They're better and better all the time. And we are, in my opinion, one of the leading states as far as being able to conduct this presidential in a non-controversial way, because we have the experience of mail ballot elections. But we also need to follow all those national steps that I mentioned. We still need to get the rules out early, and counties need to work very closely with the Secretary of State. I think she's doing a good job from what I can see, and I think people are excited, and you really need to work closely with them. I would really encourage every county to do that. I think we need to develop COVID-specific contingencies. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when you think about it, election judge, for instance, nationwide, the average age of an election judge is, I think, 67 years old. I think that age is older in Broomfield, at least when I was the clerk. That's the highest group that's in danger of COVID, right? So I believe we're going to get judges who may not want to do it. I'd be hesitant, if I was at risk of being a judge, and I just said, we need more people. So we need COVID-specific contingencies. I think that when we also look at other contingencies, what's that mean as far as mail ballot and maximizing voting by mail? I think there needs to be a real push from a health perception to utilize the mail ballot. I've always been a proponent of giving people as many ways to vote as possible, in person, early, whatever. But this year, I think we really need to stress the mail aspect of it. When you look at polling places, they're going to have a lot of challenges, and I'll discuss that a little bit more in the Broomfield specific part of it. But when you think about social distancing at a polling place, what's that going to look like? Okay, can we have the next screen? Specific steps for Broomfield. Again, it's incorporating what I mentioned at the national level, the state level, and push that voting by mail. Well, how do you do that? How do you maximize that? Well, you make it easy. You make it as easy as possible for people. Let me give you an example. Before I left, we bought 3 or 4 extra ballot boxes. Well, I don't know if they're up. If they're not up, they should be up. You should have as many ballot boxes as possible for people to drop off their ballots. And it should be clear where they do that. In my opinion, you should put those in your lowest performing precincts. Let the data drive where these should be. And that would be one way to do it. Hire and train more election judges. That's so important. As I mentioned, we're just going to need more people. Part of that COVID contingency. What happens if your judges get sick? What do you do? How's the contact with all those judges? I mean, you're going to need a lot of judges this year. And I know with mail ballots, every year we had gone with fewer and fewer judges because we were getting more efficient, more streamlined. Not this year. I really believe you should have a lot of election judges. And I'll make a plea throughout this thing. Whoever's in charge of your judges, really work hard to get as many as possible to help the county out and help yourselves out. Mailing ballots. For Broomfield, I've always been a proponent, mail them from Broomfield. Mail them from the Broomfield post office or the bulk facility in Denver. You want to get those ballots in the hands of voters as quickly as possible so that they have time to return those and return those as early as possible. Um, cure letters. When a signature is rejected, for those of you who don't know, they compare signatures. It's how you do it to ensure that the ballot is countable. It came from the person it was supposed to. And so you compare these signatures. And if it's a good signature, the ballot's processed and counted. If it's a questionable signature, it's rejected, or they forget to sign their ballot, the voter forgets to sign it, they send them out a letter. Those letters should be mailed out the same day that ballot has been rejected. Again, you just want to maximize the time that voters have to cure, to get their vote to count. And the way to do that, it's all about time. It's all about giving that voter as much time as possible. And let's see, handling social media misinformation. That's going to be big. Like I said, up the national level, but into Broomfield level also. I used to worry about things like that. Somebody gets on Twitter, Facebook, they say things like, voting's closed today, long lines, I waited 3 hours, right, to discourage people from going. We used to have a process, and they probably still do. It's probably even better now, I don't know, but it needs to happen, where they monitor social media for misinformation that would discourage participation or limit participation. It's going to be key everywhere. There'll be things that say, provisional ballots don't count, or they only count if the race is close. They need to monitor that. You need to give people the correct information in a very factual, timely manner. Because again, elections is all about time, and you don't have a lot of time. So the quicker you can do this, the more prepared you are, the more successful you'll be. And I think part of that, as I'll get into a little later, can come from the parties and help in that aspect. Okay, next slide. Steps for the Broomfield Democratic Party. The overall election process, when it was developed, it was with an envision that there would be community involvement, right? It's your election. It's not the county's election. It's your election. It's the people of Broomfield's election. So, it should be very transparent to the people of Broomfield what's going on in their election. And again, it's the public election. It's the public's. It's yours. So be involved. To take control of it. You have tremendous amount of power and sway on how things are done and when they're done. You should use that, because again, it's your election. It's no one else's. So please utilize that. The party has basic fundamental role in the election process. Sure, it's to nominate candidates. That's huge. But an absolute fundamental aspect of elections and the party is to ensure that the election is conducted fair and accurately. Those people that are listening that were my election judges, it's going to be a flashback, because I would always talk at election judges about this, because you are. You're the judges that you appoint, and the party, you're the eyes and ears of the community. That's the role. That's what you do. You keep an eye on the process, on government. That's what you do. That's a fundamental role of the party. And next slide. So there's 3 ways that I see it that the party ensures fair and equitable elections. One's with the election judges, election watchers, and the canvass board. Next slide. Election judges. Again, the election judges are probably rolling their eyes, because I used to say this all the time, every election. But the election judges' responsibility, election judges always work in teams of 2, of opposite party or different party, a Democrat, Republican, Democrat, unaffiliate, Libertarian, whatever, right? But they're different parties. And their job is to watch each other, to make sure that things are being done equitably and fairly. And then I would tell the judges that those teams of judges, what their job is to watch the public, watch the election staff, to make sure that everything is done properly and according to law. And just, feels right? There's a field test to this stuff, that people believe that there's fairness in the process. And then lastly, I would tell everybody that it's everybody's job to watch me as the election official, to make sure that if they're uncomfortable with something that I did or my staff did, that they would report it not only to me, but to the party chair. That's your role, to say that you're not feeling comfortable with something. So the party chair can get back to the county and find out, what's going on. There's probably a very valid reason, probably nothing's going on, but it's that ensuring that it's fair and instilling confidence in the process. And so that's real important that the judges know that. And when we talk about judges, who appoints the party? How are judges appointed? How do you become a judge? Well, as you know, they're appointed by the party. The clerk's office, we're going to take who you give us. And it's so important that, in my view, for this election, with COVID-19, it's time to involve new people. I don't know where you are in your judges selection, if you started, if you're done with it. I don't know where that is, but try to get as many people as you can and get new people involved. When you think about it, there were many times we would use the same judges year after year after year, probably because it was easy for the parties to nominate these people. As the government, as the clerk's office, we have to use the people that you give us, right? So you have complete control over who comes and who you nominate. And as I mentioned, with COVID, the age, is scary. It's scary because they're elderly now. And I'm in that group, right? I'm in that higher age group. But I think it's so important that we get new people involved. And when you think about it, you have a once in a lifetime opportunity for many people. A lot of people that I talk to right now, they're unemployed. They don't have a job. When the virus is over, and I hope things go back to normal, they'll be back employed. But this is an opportunity for them to really give back to their community. Maybe they've always wanted to be involved. They didn't know how. They had a family. They were working, didn't have time. Go get them. Go get them and have them be involved. The other thing that happens in my fear, and like most election officials will tell you, is, we trust all our judges, but like anybody, if you work with somebody for a long time, you become complacent. And you may work with your partner the last 5 years and they're doing something, you say, that doesn't seem quite right. I mean, I don't remember that, we tell the voter that not to do that or do this or, just something. But you know what? They're a good person and I've worked with them forever. So it's probably fine. That's not what you want in elections. You want a judge who's going to question, who's going to ask, who's going to make sure things are done right. That's the role of the party. That's the role of judges. When you look at judges, I'll say diversify in that try to find judges, because I think the pool's bigger. Find judges that are maybe multilingual, that can help in the early voting or the polling, the precinct polling places. That can speak Vietnamese, Hmong, Spanish, anything that will remove barriers to voting. Now, when I was there, and I'm sure Jennifer still does it, we try to find translators, but if we have translators there, people just feel so much better if they can go into a place and relate to somebody that can speak their language, help them understand the ballot, answer some questions. That is important if you can do that. The other thing to keep in mind is you no longer have to get judges only from Broomfield. You can get them from any county. So if maybe you know a college student, right? They're online now. My wife's a college professor, and they, it's online. So hopefully they're going to have some time. Hopefully they'll want to be an election judge, and so please go after that. Where are you on election judges? After I've rambled for 20 minutes, I should have asked.
Well, this is Kathy, Jim, and I can put myself up there again. And where we are is we have Tina Thomas. You know Tina.
Oh, absolutely.
She is our elections liaison, and she is getting a lot of people who have volunteered to be election judges through the online process that you've just mentioned. And also we have offered through our county clerk to help in Weld County because they may have a shortage of judges. And we as I think you remember, we always are on time, and we always have a long list of folks.
Absolutely.
Have said that I think our list now is 75, and I'll turn it off to Tina, or hand it off to Tina to get a little more details, because she has been very successful at getting more election judges, and I think we're seeing a more diverse pool. And we are very fortunate at caucus. We normally get a very good response from people who want to be election judges. The problem more is that we have more people volunteer than the city and county can use. So we have a long list, a lot of pent up election judge energy.
Nice.
So I'm going to ask Tina to fill in a little more on the details of how many election judges we have and that sort of thing. Tina, you need to unmute. Oh, I'll do that for you. Go ahead, Tina.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. We had some problems with it last time. Hi, Jim. Good to see you.
Nice to see you, Tina.
Love the beard. We have, as Kathy had said, we have approximately 75 people on our list.
Great.
There's a new entity called workelections.com, and within the last week, we've received almost 15 applications from that website. The website is national, it's out of Washington, nonpartisan. So you can be in any place in the country. You fill it out. You, of course, say where your county is, and that entity will send the application directly to the election official, head of the county. And then Todd has been sending them directly to me.
Great.
Just some stats. From the ages 26 to 35, we've received 4 applications. Ages 36 to 50, we received 6. 51 to 64, we received 3. And just fascinating backgrounds on several of them. I was telling Charlie this morning, I think that I've received one from a doctoral candidate in the Department of Anthropology at CU Boulder.
Wow.
Yay.
Yeah.
So there's, and as Kathy said, for the caucus, several of the judges that were people that said they wanted to be involved in the elections were the 36 to 50 age.
Okay.
So very, very good. And we're getting more men that are responding, saying that they're interested in working the elections. So from the diversity, I think that we can really add some of the younger and
Perfect.
more males involved in the elections.
That's incredible. Great job, Tina.
So we're working that, and once we get all the people, because we have, election judges, we have watchers, we have retrievers, scanners, you know the list. So as soon as Broomfield County has what they are going to need, because they're still working on the new processes and procedures. So I can't really start putting people in place yet because we don't really know what we need yet. Because we didn't do the Agilis, as you know, in June. So we're starting with the Agilis for this coming election. So that may just change things. We don't know.
Okay. No, great job. It sounds good. You know, I don't know the number either that Broomfield's looking to get, but it should be big. I mean, in my opinion, it should be big. You know,
Yeah, Todd had said something around 40 Dems. So we'll see if that's really the number that they're looking for.
okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. I'll continue on. Thank you, Tina. That was great. Right. Voter intent. I think we just want to make sure that your judges utilize the state comes out with this voter intent guide that talks about how to interpret marks on a ballot. You just want to make sure that your judges are utilizing that and their teammate is utilizing that for consistency. You know, I mean, as you know, I've conducted elections that had a 10-vote difference. And that's a key. I mean, it's consistency, right? And how you interpret voter intent and people's ballot. So make sure that happens. And Tina, I know you do this. I'm glad you're in charge. So this is cool because the biggest thing you can do is talk to your judges. Make sure that they feel comfortable with you, that if they see something or they question something, they can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, you know, this doesn't feel right to me. You know, whether it's you know, whoever is supposed to do that. I said to Tina, because you got the judges, I don't know if that's going to be your role, but whoever that is, whether, you know, when it's Linda, the party chair, or there's someone else, talk to your judges, talk to them during the election. Make sure that they feel comfortable relaying information to you. And it's just not to rat people out. Maybe there's a good way to improve the process, right? I mean, and you want to be able to do that. So talk to your judges. Okay, next slide. Election watchers. Well, okay, election watchers appointed by the party. Again, you're going to appoint those. They're going to be trained through the Secretary of State's office through the party. I believe that's still how it's working. And so election watchers, they can observe any election-related activity. That means they can watch your judges. They can watch the election staff. You know, I can remember election watchers watching me. It's a good role. It's a needed role. You know, and you can say, well, why is that needed? You know, here I have election judges. Well, an election watcher, judges can't watch everything, right? And so it's another set of eyes on the process, be it voting and how that's going. Make sure there's you know, nothing going on with that. But in my mind, it was always more important that they can actually watch, you know, maybe watch judges. Like, you know, I know you're going to use the Jill's machine now, but there's going to be some method for signature verification. And my fear was always that you'd have one judge, regardless of party, that would really intimidate the other judge. And it would be like, you know, okay, I'm just going to go along with whatever this judge says. And that's not how the system's supposed to work. They're supposed to work in teams and, you know, watch each other. And you just want to keep that stuff open. So the election watchers really have an important role. And they also should be reporting concerns right back to the party, whatever those concerns are. You know, polls didn't open on time, whatever it is. And again, I'll stress that same thing. If you know the watchers that you appoint, talk to your watchers. Candidates can appoint watchers. If you know who the candidates are appointing, pick up the phone, talk to them, because you want to know about things that are that, you know, may be going on, maybe not going on, and you can squash it, right? You want, again, as I mentioned, you also want to squash that misinformation. So it's important that you know what's going on throughout the election. If we have the next slide. Okay, Canvas board. Tina's been a Canvas board member. She's really good because she has these qualities I'm going to talk about. But Canvas board, they represent the voters of Broomfield. Their job, their responsibility is to sign off on the election results. In order to do that, they need to be satisfied that every ballot is accounted for, right? And how do you do that? Well, you got to be inquisitive. You got to ask all the questions. You need to be willing to speak up. And don't be satisfied until all your questions are answered. The county clerk, the county election division, should be able to count for every ballot. If there's a ballot in one style that we should have counted 230 and we counted 231, we should know how that happened. Or 229, we should know how that happened. And it should be something that's logical, that makes sense to this Canvas board member. Because again, you're representing the people. You need to look at your neighbors and say, no, it was done right. That's your role. That's a big responsibility. And that the role of the election audit, not just taking it at face value, but really understanding the data. So that's a big job for whoever's going to do that this year. So again, that's a key part of Broomfield being able to ensure the voters that it was done accurately and fairly. Okay, next slide. Okay, more for the Democratic Party. Okay, these are just some other thoughts that I have as far as you know, you need to identify your supporters. Now, I'm not sure what's the best way for you guys to identify your supporters, but when you do, you got to make sure they vote and that their ballots were counted. And so, you know, how do you do that? Well, the clerk's office has a report that has everybody who voted. And so you should be able to take that report, and I say you, I couldn't do that. I'm not that computer literate, but somebody is on your staff that can compare who voted to your supporters. So you can make sure that they've returned their ballots, which is something I want to mention earlier and it just slipped my mind till right now. In order to do that though, it works best when people return their ballots early, right? Because if they return them early, instead of contacting 5,000 people, maybe you're only contacting 500 and then down to 50 as it goes further and further down. But the key is to get the ballots back early. You know, I talked earlier about, you know, we used to put a little thing on our envelopes that said, you know, return your ballot early. Try to get the county to do that. If they can't do that, you know, ballots are printed, you know, whatever. Have them insert some information that says, get this ballot back early. And, you know, they can do it on a pink piece of paper because they haven't inserted ballots yet. Because obviously we don't even know the candidates yet. So, you know, there's time to do stuff like that. Whatever they can do and whatever you can do to encourage people to return the ballot sooner will just help the party and quite honestly will help the clerk's office also. So you want to reach out to those who have not returned ballots and encourage the early ballot return. Again, the next slide. Signature discrepancies. Signature discrepancies, as I mentioned, I think the goal should be when there's a signature discrepancy that you contact the voter right away and talk to them about the rejected ballot so they can cure it, right? Because maybe they forgot to sign it, whatever, but that will be done. And how you do that, again, as I mentioned earlier, the clerk should be sending out a cure letter, hopefully on the day that it's rejected. And they'll create a list that they should be able to give to you daily, if not more often, so you can be proactive on this. And when you're proactive, look for patterns. I mean, I know I would appreciate that if something came back to me and said, you know, all these people aren't signing their ballots. They're all from this age group, or they're from this part of the county, you know, whatever. So we could try to address that. And so you could address it also. Because again, everyone wants every ballot to count that comes in. And so again, look for patterns, be proactive. The Agilus machine, it's been around for a while. It was there when I was a clerk. I never did it, but I know there's other counties who have. And what I would strongly suggest is that you observe that signature validation machine. You look at it not only in test mode, but daily, and really say, would election judges be making those same decisions? Would an election judge be accepting that signature? Would an election judge be rejecting that signature? It's in my mind, this is just me, in my mind, it's a delicate balance, right? Because if you accept everybody, well, you know, it's the fraudulent thing that, you know, that Trump misrepresents. If you're rejecting too many improperly, I won't say too many, you're going to reject what's wrong, but they're rejected improperly. It's voter suppression. You're making people respond to things when they didn't need to. So that's going to be a key for you guys to look at that machine, have confidence in the machine, have confidence in the process, so you can, again, encourage the voters that, yeah, this is a good process. It's good. It's working. It's working like it's supposed to. And again, the cure process, as I mentioned earlier, get the letters out, contact those people who need to cure their signature. Okay, next screen. Okay.
Jim,
yeah.
We're going to try and hurry you a little bit because I think Gary's got a couple of questions in chat.
Okay. I'll talk fast.
Okay, talk faster.
Okay, the basic thing on this slide is just self-explanatory. They can't be counted unless they're received. So make sure you get your supporters to turn in their ballots and monitor it. Let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
I'm almost done, I think. Oh, okay, there's so much I want to talk about, but I'll be brief. Voting in person, make sure that people know that they can vote on the machines or they can vote with paper, right? With the virus, I think there's going to be some concerns with the machines as far as you know, cleanliness between use, that type of thing. So there may be a line with that. So make sure people understand they can use paper and they can vote the paper there or they can take it home with them. It's just a matter of when they're there and what they ask the judges to do. And they can request assistance either from election judges or they can bring someone in with them. And they don't need to explain why they want assistance. They just ask for assistance. Okay, next slide. Okay. COVID-19 and voter suppression. Voters without masks, they can vote. You can't turn people away because they don't have a mask. You know, voters with masks. My belief. I haven't seen any direction from the Secretary of State, but my belief is you can't deny a person to vote because they refuse to take their mask off. When they ask the election judges in early voting, they're supposed to ask for an ID. Judges are supposed to ask for an ID. It's going to be hard to tell who's who behind a big mask, right? I don't know how they're going to make that happen, but I don't think you can tell someone they cannot vote because they either refuse to take their mask off or you can't identify them. It's probably a provisional or some other method. You'll want to talk to Todd and Jennifer and make sure you guys understand what that looks like for people and that your supporters know what that looks like. Broomfield's going to need a large facility or increased locations. I don't know what they're doing, but when you think about social distancing between voting booths, it's going to be a real concern. At least it would be in every jurisdiction. You know, just to avoid those long lines, you're going to need some room. Okay, next slide.
Actually, Jim, can I
please
redirect you? Gary, why don't you go ahead with some of the chat questions and I'll stop sharing.
Okay. Jim, we've gotten a number of questions and a couple of them are kind of similar. So let's see if I can sort of package these. You mentioned that secretaries of state need to set clear rules early. What are some ways to disseminate this information to voters? And a very similar question is, who should be doing the educating of the public? Should it be the Secretary of State herself or the counties?
In my opinion, it should the guidance and the overall view should come from the Secretary of State. That should be the push, right? But individual counties, individual towns, they know their voters and how to reach their voters. So it's a combination of both, I believe. I don't think it's one or the other.
Okay. One question that I'm curious about, we've heard that in some states, like in Wisconsin in their primary, I think Milwaukee had like maybe 2 polling places open, something really ridiculous. I have relatives who live there, and they claim that a big part of the problem was they could not find enough Republican judges to show up. And I understand you mentioned that a lot of judges are older, they're a little bit frightened about what's going on. But is there any chance that this is kind of a form of voter suppression also, to just say, hey, let's not send any judges, so we have to close some polling places?
Potentially, absolutely. But again, I think keep in mind, you also should be talking to the clerk's office. They should have a plan. How do you reach those unaffiliated voters? Unaffiliated voters could be judges. How do you reach them? I mean, it's not necessarily the Democratic Party or the Republican Party that's going to reach out to unaffiliates, because all you can do is the party people. But local governments, city council, make a plea. Make a plea for unaffiliated voters. Again, in Colorado, you can use them from other counties. Use them. Utilize them.
Okay, cool. I think Kathy has a question she wants to ask.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, and then actually that issue that Gary just brought up. What would you have done when you're county clerk, because I understand that our Republican Party is sometimes not as generous with their election judges as we are.
Sure.
So what would the county clerk do, and what would you have done if there were no election judges from the Republican Party? Would you just look for unaffiliated judges and not close any polling places?
I would never close polling places. I would do anything in my power, whether it's I do my own recruiting of judges, and utilize whatever resources we have. There's nothing that prohibits the government from advertising, right? To putting something in the newspaper, online, right? Lots of places. Again, think about it with the high school kids, right? I mean, that's changed with COVID, but I used to go to the high schools and give them this long civic lesson, even longer than I did tonight, about the importance of participating. And yeah, the government needs to do that. That's the role.
It's unfortunate that thought even has to cross our minds. I would never have before this have had the thought like that Gary just articulated. But the things I wanted to ask about were 2 things: election watchers, and rejected ballots. Okay. You mentioned something about the party having a role in identifying patterns of rejected ballots. I didn't know we had access to information about rejected ballots.
Yes, you should have
Tina knows about that. I don't.
Okay, yeah. There should be a list that comes on a score that that would list the voter and the reason for the rejection. And you should be able, and unless there's some rule that's changed since I was there, you should be able to get that from Jennifer and Todd.
Okay,
Yeah,
let me ask for that then. Yeah. And the other thing is on election watchers. I was on a call with some chairs in other counties, and they had experiences in some counties where Republican judges or watchers would stare at and hover over voters. And they felt that having election watchers at the polling places was extremely important. We in Broomfield have not felt the need to do that, partly because we have such an effective mail-in balloting system, and I don't know how many people exactly vote in person. I'd like to know what that is. But it seems like it hasn't been an issue here. Is it your feeling that we should have election watchers at the in-person voting locations? And who selects them? I mean, we nominate, but does the county clerk actually select and certify credentials and all that stuff?
You will nominate who's going to be a watcher for the party. They have to take a test. It's online. It was an online test from the Secretary of State that talked about how close they can be to voters, what they can say to voters, what they can do, and then the county clerk will verify that they are in fact a Democrat, because that's one of the conditions. Unlike just like judges, right? They need to be affiliated with the Democratic Party, and that they have taken the test of the Secretary of State. So it's a 2-part full, but I would recommend that. As I started this thing off, it's your election, and the more transparency you have in it, the better. It's so easy to go back and say, well, look at all these people who watched what I did. Understand the process.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And I've just recently become aware of election watchers.
Yeah.
Poll watchers, I think they were called in the past.
Yeah, they used to be called poll watchers.
Yeah, I actually served as a poll watcher in the 2008 election. So we saw instances where Broomfield police would be parked really close to a polling location.
Yeah,
I had to call and say, this is intimidating. So
I've received those calls, right? So yeah, you need to do that, and I would have conversations with the chief of police before the election, but inevitably, right? I mean, that happens. I mean, because the police are, trying to catch bad guys and do all kinds of stuff, right? And so it's I know it's unintentional, but it can be intimidating for people. And I get that. So yeah, that's a conversation. But they're voting. The time's so small. It's things like electioneering too close. I mean, judges can't watch everything. So election watchers are valuable. I'd use them. I would use them.
So I think we've got time for one more question. You've been wildly popular, Jim. We may have to have an encore appearance. Next week, or in a couple weeks, we're going to talk about national popular vote.
Oh yeah.
I'm interested to know what you see as the pros and cons of this and how it would work in Colorado.
Okay. Everyone knows what it is, right? So I don't need to go through it, but basically it's going to be on the ballot this year. And what I see, the people who support it view it as, well, we can go back to people who oppose it. Let's start there. That you're not going to send your 9 delegates from Colorado based upon the popular vote. It's because we have the electoral college, and it more represents voices with smaller states that they can have representation. The things they are going to tell you in a very forefront way that if we do this, what we're doing is allowing California, New York to make up our minds for us what we want in Colorado. The people who are supportive of this are going to tell you it's one person, one vote. We don't want to happen what happened in the last presidential election, where we have a president who didn't get the majority of votes. That's going to be the argument. Does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay.
Okay. I know there's many other questions, Jim, and if I could do this over, I would have pushed you through those slides, but here we are.
Okay.
And I want to say thank you so much. Really appreciate you putting the deck together and all of your service to Broomfield. You've been, I could clap for you, but we're on a video call. But we really appreciate what you've done for Broomfield, and particularly for the time that you spent with us tonight. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. Sorry I'm so long-winded. I try to disclaim that up front.
I am too. So anyway, happy retirement, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Oh, it's so good to see people. Neil, take care. Good to see you.
Jim, we
Thanks,
missed you.
Jim.